In September of '60, I first met Bill after I made an appearance in juvenile traffic court and lost my driver's license for 90 days. Now, they were tough on high school speedsters and 53 Ford convertibles back then. Oh, what a day that was. I took the city bus from downtown to UNM. Somehow I got the idea to drop in and visit my friend Dr. William J. Coster. He and I had been friends since I was a small kid. Anyway, I sat in on a lecture given by Howard Dittmer and felt a tap on my shoulder and a note placed in my hand, and it said, "Come by my office when you can." So I hustled upstairs to Dr. Coster's office, and he announced, "There's somebody new here you'd like to meet." And we walked across the hall to Dr. Bill's office. He was unpacking some books and greeted me with a big smile. So I spent the next 2 hours there. He just moved from College Station, Texas, after earning his PhD at Texas A&M, and brought some critters from Big Bend National Park along with him, where he had finished his PhD work. "Would you like to see some of these?" He showed me a bank of cages, some of which I now use for my own snakes, and he pulled out a big old Mexican milk snake, a Trans-Pecos rat snake, or two, I think, and a large Texas lyre snake just for starters. And he also had a few rattlers. Oh, there was a mottled rock rattlesnake, a blacktail, a Mojave, and a small Baird's rat snake. Pushing my eyeballs back into their sockets, I helped him unload more books than I had to leave to catch the next bus home. I took the UNM entrance exam the next week and somehow managed to wriggle my way into school with mediocre grades. And UNM must have been hard up for students back then, even though semester's tuition was only $110. How's that sound? He became my advisor a year later after I'd enrolled and continued to help me out during my undergraduate days. He even let me take his New Mexico Herps course as a sophomore, which is open to juniors and seniors only, and as you might expect, I aced it. When I returned from year's adventures in Vietnam, courtesy of the U.S. Army, in December of '67, he asked me if I'd like to do herp research in Big Bend with him, as he was updating his PhD fieldwork from 1957 to '60. And that was just plain fun, although it led to hot work by day, road cruising by night, and the third ever hooded black-headed snake loose on my VW bus one evening. That's what I had at the time. Then there were his wife Paula's strawberry pitaya cactus shortcakes and shots of Sotol to make our heads spin and sharpen our eyes. But that's another Texas tall tale for another time.
This is Damon Salceus. I first met Dr. Dagenhart at a New Mexico Herpetological Society meeting. I was 13 at the time. He was a physically formidable man, not particularly tall, but for the entire time that I knew him, he had big, bushy eyebrows. He was an absolute mountain goat in the field. Loved hiking his entire life. He was always very engaging and accepting, even when our early introductions involved me as a youngster whose excitement, I'm sure, was occasionally overwhelming. After I was accepted into the University of New Mexico, I would spend sometimes hours in between classes up in his office, and he would rifle through his filing cabinets full of reprinted literature to share with me any copies he thought pertinent to whatever conversation we might be having at the time. I remember him telling me stories of finding ridge-nosed rattlesnakes in New Mexico and Trans-Pecos rat snakes in Sierra County, and I was particularly taken by stories that he told me of finding gray-banded king snakes in Big Bend National Park when he worked there in the 1950s. It must have been an incredibly fantastic thing to find a species that many did not know even existed in a place that's as expansive and magical as Big Bend. He shared with me the first copy of Denny Miller's thesis on the gray-banded king snake, the life history of the gray-banded king snake, that I had ever seen. He let me borrow it, shared with me every single piece of publication that he had regarding this species. And I don't know that at the time he realized what a difference it was going to make in the direction of my life, and how many years and decades, I guess now, I've spent in pursuit of observing them in the field. It didn't matter how old I was or how old I got. He was always very engaging and happy to see me. I marveled at his vigor even as he got older, playing handball on a regular basis and taking part in high-stakes poker games with the likes of Tony Hillerman. He was cut from a different cloth, and I'm definitely going to miss him.
I don't have any special stories about him, but I remember his house on Campus Boulevard, where I went for some reason in the 60s. His wonderful wife, Paula, was such a nice, funny, and interesting person. And they had Charlie Brown, a big Siamese cat, and desert tortoises in the backyard. They were both excellent teachers, she at Sandia Prep, and he, of course, at UNM. I took herpetology from him in the early 70s and loved his classes and field trips. They were also, the couple, were also fun on NMHS field trips, and he told good stories of his herping adventures with Hobart Smith, Mickey and Dr. Bogert, Roger Conant, and Carl Kaufeld. In fact, he's mentioned in Carl Kaufeld's book about how elegant Bill's camping ability was. He had a trailer and he had everything. You know, he was not he had first class camping equipment and real dishes, and you know, it was very, very fancy camping for him. I don't know if that was him or his wife that did that. Anyway, we had some mutual friends too in various reptile houses and different zoos around the country, because I was involved in the reptiles. Whenever I would go to a zoo conference, I'd hunt out the reptile people and we'd talk about people that we knew in common. He and Paula had some good years in their house in Tomei, with bats in the attic that flew out at dusk. When we had parties there, we would always go out on the front porch at dusk to watch the bats fly out. He was famous too for his frugal ways, and he did not like it when we raised the Herp Society dues to $5, I think, as I recall. It used to be $3, and he thought it was not necessary to have it be $5. And he also enjoyed a good beer or a glass of Sotol, and his potluck beans were awesome. I miss him a lot.
Well, I have a little quick story about Bill too, but it doesn't have a lot to do with herpetology, but it does have to do with this time of year, which always reminds me of Bill. And I don't know how many people know that Bill was one of the largest landowners in Tierras Canyon, and he took care of his property, hundreds of acres. So every December, Charlie and I, along with our friends Mike and Deb Hill, biologist Mike and Deb Hill, would ask Bill if we could come up to his property and cut Christmas trees and firewood. And he loved that, because that helped maintain the property and thin trees out, you know, within a mile of his home, for obviously for fire reasons. So somehow every year we got lucky and picked the most beautiful day of the month, and the snow was deep and crunchy and the sky was clear blue, and we'd be bundled up with our saws and chainsaws and axes and have a wonderful morning cutting Christmas trees and firewood. And then we'd tromp over through this and sit with him around his fireplace. And he would always make us hot cider, and we would always bring his favorite food, which was pie. Dessert pie. So not brownies, not cheesecake, not tarts, pie. So we'd have these wonderful afternoons sitting around, you know, on a winter day with Bill in his living room with the fireplace going, drinking hot cider, eating pie, and of course talking about herps. So this time of year, I think of him, and I thought of him actually last week. One of my friends asked if I had seen any Christmas tree lots open yet. And I thought, gosh, I haven't had to think about a Christmas tree lot in a long time, because we always got our trees from Bill's property. So I'm thinking of him a lot this time of year as well. It's in the summer when Herb's.
I may have told this story one time before, but I can remember in sort of my early years at the New Mexico Herb Society in the mid-90s, going on one of my first field trips with the group to the Guyanus Mountains. And I was probably following Dr. Degenhardt around a little bit. And I think if I remember right, we were poking around at a old mine tailing somewhere back there. I really couldn't even say where exactly now, but there was lots of boulders and rocks about, and I wasn't having a lot of luck looking for much of anything. And Bill had all of his little specimen bags. He used to carry plastic bags through his belt, and would often have little lizards or a small snake or something sort of kept in his belt loop that way. Anyways, he looked at me, he said, "Hey, go try that rock over there." And it was a nice big flat rock that you might suspect a little animal might be under. Sure enough, I flipped it over and there was a little night snake coiled underneath it. And it was my very first time seeing a night snake. And I wasn't even exactly sure what it was at the time. And I pretty much thought that was almost a superhuman power that he had. And I look at flat rocks differently ever since then. And that and a lot of other, moments at the meetings, feeling encouraged by him and had a good time as a younger person, asking him silly questions and things like that.